Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight we are talking about Survivor Edge of Extinction, Episode 4. I don't know about you, but I felt watching this episode like it's finally sort of clicking with me. And I
Yeah,
don't. Did you feel that way too?
yeah. I mean, I think we're starting to get to know everybody a little bit
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
better. The swap, I think, helped, even though
Yeah.
they were essentially
Yeah.
very similar tribes. But even just kind of breaking it up into the smaller groups,
Right.
um, yeah, it's just starting to pick up some steam. I think the now that we know what Edge of Extinction is,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
uh, and how it's interesting, and what we learned in this one, which of course ostensibly we could have known this, is that you people who voted you out start showing up,
Yeah. Well, and
and
that's like not necessarily a guarantee. It's really just dependent on what order people go out in. But certainly, it's the case here.
yeah, I mean at some point you had to feel like that would be likely.
Mm-hmm.
It's amplified by the fact that it continues to be people from the same tribe, so
Right.
people who voted you out, and you've got Reem there who is decided to, even though she's been humbled a little bit by being on Edge of Extinction, she still is holding an incredible grudge against all of them.
It's interesting you say that, just because I actually got more of a vibe, like, not that she's just fine with everybody, but that if any, it seemed like she was the one almost kind of defending them against like when Keith went over and sat by the mast, and he was just really complaining about Chris. She was the one that was kind of saying, not making excuses for him exactly, but basically saying, like, well, he's going through the remorse process. Like, basically trying to, uh, in a way, kind of defending Chris.
Yeah, now that you say that, maybe I was kind of misreading her initial reaction, and that it's almost like, which may have been part of her problem in this game.
Hmm.
It's almost like a joke, like a little bit sarcastic, the way, because she greeted him like really negatively, and
Mm-hmm.
we see in next time when Rick comes in, she does the same thing, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're not welcome here," or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. It's something like that, and so maybe there's some sarcasm there that
Yeah.
you know that I wasn't picking up, because you're right, that did happen. So her initial thing was like, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm going to say this to him," but then like we're going to you know get along with him because he's going to go through the remorse process.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's just been the issue with her, is that sometimes how she is portraying herself outwardly is not what her true inward motivation is, and that she's actually a lot more thoughtful than she's been portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well,
and obviously, to be fair, they are giving us those times, but
right.
the part that stuck out to me was her kind of like, talking about, "Oh, well, look who it is, here comes Chris, paste your own medicine." Like, again, it wasn't those exact words, but it was like
Mm-hmm.
essentially the mentality she greeted him with.
Right. So
And
I
I
think
think
I
Keith picked
sorry.
up on that as well and
Yeah.
kept the complaining going. And then that's where you're right. I think she was like, "Oh, no, wait, like, no, Keith, like, yeah, she didn't say it like this, but it's like, yeah, we're going to kind of rib him a little bit, but, now that he's here, let him go through his thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll all work together." But,
Yeah. I think she has kind of a very adaptive personality. I was starting to say reactive, but I think adaptive is more the correct thing. Is that she definitely changes things up based on what she is surrounded by. Meaning, I think her attitude, like she even talked about it last time, in the sense of feeling like she was ready to quit, but now with Keith there to take care of, she's finds a purpose in taking care of him, and so I think that she might also have been the person to complain a lot about Chris, but with Keith there kind of taking up that torch, it gives her the position to take of the more moderated. It's like, well, yeah, you're not wrong, but he is going through the process, that sort of thing. Whereas
Yeah.
if there wasn't someone else there to say the more extreme version and express the anger, she would be expressing it. You follow me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think that's, yeah. I feel like, yeah, just talking through this, I've been a little harsh on her.
Well, I think we were both on the same page in that first episode that, no matter what it was that she was trying to make happen, she clearly wasn't communicating her intentions very well, and she did things that got her voted out, and it's pretty hard to blame anyone but her for that. But since then, she hasn't really done anything that I thought was negative, like, since then. But we also haven't seen her very much. We saw her more this time than, you know.
Yep.
But Chris arrives at Edge of Extinction and really talks about feeling very betrayed. And I kind of was glad that we had Keith there to say, "What? What? How can you be that mad when you did the same thing to other people in the vote before, and probably were planning to do the same thing in the vote that got you voted out?
Yeah,
You
it's almost
thought
like we're getting like a
someone beat you at your own game, and now you're super mad about it?" Yeah.
yeah, it's almost like we're getting like a quick like kind of what's interesting about like Ponderosa videos just early in the season, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and when everybody is still there and suffering and like not getting enough to eat and stuff. Although
It's true.
interesting,
'Cause yeah, it's not like Ponderosa where they've
Yeah.
showered and they're kind of like, and they're truly out of the game. Like
Yeah.
these guys are also still kind of playing,
Right.
and so there's a whole other edge to it, you know.
Yeah. Although it's an interesting development that apparently they do have, the scuba mask and the that fishing spear. They call it a Hawaiian sling, I think. The little
Yeah.
fishing spear. So mask and flippers in the sling. So we didn't see those
Well,
before, but they obviously have them.
So what I think happened is that was that basically something every time someone new comes, they get a new
Yeah.
benefit, and so that was the benefit that came with Chris. We just didn't see the reveal because it wasn't that important.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
Because I feel like they would have mentioned it the last time.
Right.
And it also seems likely that there's going to be some new little development every time a new person shows up.
right. It's fitting with what happened last time, where they last time they got the ability to go get the rice, and so this time they get the ability to go catch the fish. It's just but again, they have to work for it. Like none of it's going to be easy, but they are getting because as there are more of them, they're going to have to feed them a little bit,
Right.
But So anyway, that's what I think happened. I
Yeah.
think that's
But
reasonable.
I think I was feeling more positively inclined towards Reem and Keith this time, just on the basis that I agreed with them that Chris does not deserve to feel as betrayed as he does. I think that's an unreasonable expectation and reaction for him to have.
It's not unreasonable for him to have it. It's unreasonable
Yeah.
for him to expect them to empathize with him.
Yes. Well, there you go. Yeah. So I guess like we can accept Reem's explanation for it, which is he's going through a process where he is mad and he doesn't know where to put the blame, and so he's starting by projecting it elsewhere. And he's going to probably go through a process.
Right.
And that's probably true. But it's also, I think, so you put it exactly right, though. It's understandable that he might have that emotional response, but it is not reasonable for him to expect anyone else to feel bad for him.
Correct.
But yeah, see, like at the same time that I can totally understand his frustration at being voted out, especially if it really came as a shock, like he just really had no idea whatsoever that people were even thinking about that. But that's the game, you know? It's like if you're trying to trick people and vote them out, just because someone else was better than me at the game I was trying to play, therefore I hate them. That's, ultimately I'm glad he seemed to calm down a little bit from that. That said, though, the idea that, when we see in the scenes from next time, Reem saying, "You're not in good graces here," but it's like, it's the same thing, though. Like, Rick didn't do anything that isn't part of the game, too.
Right, and that was her line, and so what I think, and that's what I was trying to get at, is I think she, based on how she responded to Keith, like I think that there's some sarcasm there, as in not like we're going to ostracize you, Rick. Like because originally I had that reaction of like, oh, she's being a jerk to everybody, but once you pointed out how she talked to Keith, it's like, oh, that's kind of her like ribbing of like, oh, you're not in good graces here, but then allows him to get in their graces.
I think you're exactly right because she says that, but she's also the person there greeting him and addressing him and talking to him, right? Like, she's the one that is initiating the communication process. And that's not something you do if you're actually furious with someone. Or, you could, but, if everyone just gave him the cold shoulder or something, that would be one thing. But that's not what she does. And in fact, the way she says it almost makes it sound like she's not necessarily even talking about herself as much as everybody else.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, though, we only got a little bit of that actually at the beginning of the episode. Meanwhile, though, back at the Manu camp, Wendy seems to be fairly well recovered from her ankle injury, which is good. Moving around pretty well. It might still hurt, but at least she's, not having trouble walking on it, apparently.
Yeah, it's still wrapped, but it clearly was not no longer serious.
Right. So she puts the flint back, admits to the camera that she doesn't always actually have a plan or any sort of actual expectation for what she's doing or why. It's just doing stuff to do stuff, which is kind of obvious, but it's a little bit refreshing, I guess, that she acknowledges it.
Right.
She's almost sitting there telling David now about her master plan to get through to let the chickens go. But like, let's slip. Oh, maybe I should tell you my master plan. No, actually I won't. While they're standing there next to the chickens, and then the chickens disappear. Like, what? It's like, why does she even bother to do it? I guess the only reason she bothered to do it in the middle of the night is because otherwise they would just physically stop her. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and also it felt like more.
It's a sneaky secret thing, yeah.
Yeah, like it was just more of at this point, it's now become. It's not about the chickens being released. It's about doing this thing.
Yeah.
Sort of counter to what they want.
Well, but like David's reaction in that scene is kind of the same reason that I'm enjoying watching her. Is just he's just got this bemused smile of like, you're sure playing an interesting game. You want to win, don't you? Like, why are you acting like this?
Well, and yeah, she didn't even and she even couldn't even confidently say that she did. I mean, she was like,
she said, of course I do, but she can't explain why the way she's playing would lead to that outcome. Is the problem.
Right. So yeah, it feels like it's sort of like the true motivation isn't trying to win. Mm-hmm. The true motivation is trying to, kind of do what she feels like on a day-to-day basis in a way. And she says she knows she's supposed to say she wants to win, so she's not going to say, no, I don't want to win.
Right.
But that's not really, deep down, that's not what she's.
Well, we talk about frequently in this. Hang on, we've talked many times in this show about how the nature of this game forces people to play in accordance with their actual like personality and nature, which might well be different than what they intend, right? And
Right.
in this context, she's kind of more on the far end of the bell curve here, but I think she may feel like she doesn't have a plan, but she should, or maybe she thinks other people would think she should have a plan, but she doesn't have a plan, and that's kind of intimidating and scary, and so she's kind of just reacting to that by doing stuff. And
Right.
she can't explain how that would ever lead to a successful strategy. She's just vaguely aware that she has to do things, right? And so she's doing things. And there's just not any kind of she is initiating action without a plan because I think she thinks she should be doing things whether or not she has a plan.
Right.
I don't know that I actually said anything interesting there. I kind of used a lot of words to say nothing, I think. But
I mean, just I think to summarize what you're trying to say is that she knows deep down that she's supposed to be doing things that are in accordance with a
yeah,
plan. So she's almost creating plans around what she wants to do. I mean, that's the thing
right.
we've seen before. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
she's kind of like an odd example of that,
Yeah, so she's following her impulses.
right? And creating a strategy to kind of that defends what her impulses are. So,
Yeah, yeah. So the
sorry.
the light changes this time of day, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So in any event, though, everyone else is really confused by her. They kind of don't know how to deal with her. Kelly says she thinks that Wendy is the obvious vote, and yet. So in the meantime, though, we now head to what might have been a challenge, except it's not. It's the tribe mix-up, and everyone else is really, on the Kama tribe is really shocked to see Chris gone for reasons that make perfect sense. All they know about him was that he was one of the strongest challenge performers.
right.
So for a tribe that's really, been losing, it seems surprising to vote out one of the stronger challenge people.
Yep.
So here's a question. How do you think the producers felt about the outcome of their random tribe mix-up here?
So I'm not 100% convinced that it was random.
Okay.
I know they wouldn't. I don't feel like they would portray it as random when it really wasn't. But it felt too. The odds of it happening that way are so low. It just felt like that they did that on purpose. I don't.
Well,
But that doesn't make sense either. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't.
yeah, I agree. It's surprising because it seems like an unlikely outcome, but at the same time, given what we saw, unless the whole thing was just fake, which I don't really think it would have been. But also, like, I can't imagine why they would cause this outcome. If they were going to fake it, why would they do it? Why would they produce this outcome? That seems like a really weird decision.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a
Because,
weird feeling I had. It just didn't feel. It just felt like so ridiculous that.
mm-hmm.
And because how did it worked out
So they
where
had platters of wrapped buffs where you couldn't tell what color it was.
that's
And they
right.
carried them around, and
Yeah, I think
people
I
picked
missed
them
like
off
how they.
off the platter.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's what. Yeah, I think I wasn't paying enough attention when I had this feeling. I hadn't been paying enough attention to how they selected, and it just again when they were talking about the odds. So because how did it? I'm trying to remember exactly like how to describe what
well, so
happened.
basically, you had the Kama tribe was much bigger than the Manu tribe because they hadn't lost anyone,
Right.
right? So what it happened is essentially is you take that tribe and split it in half, and now it's two tribes, and then the Manu tribe stays together, and then Wendy flips to one of the other tribes. That's essentially the outcome. So two of the so the new Lesu tribe is all old Manu people.
Right. So that yeah. So that's where it kind of okay. So this is what when I hadn't paid attention to how they got selected,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at it. Okay, so they left the like loser tribe together to see if maybe they can if you kind of dilute it a little bit maybe they can get something going.
Mm-hmm.
Split up the bigger tribe and then take the person who was most at risk from the loser tribe, quote unquote, and
Mm-hmm.
just and cycle them in somewhere else to see if they can get new life. Because at this point, like after Wendy had let go of the chickens, like had they
Well,
been
that
staying in
actually
the
hadn't
same
happened
tribe,
yet. They did the mix up was before she set the chickens
right? But
free.
that's what I'm saying. Like had that tribe stayed together and all those things happened, and
Mm-hmm.
like she was definitely the most at risk already, and
Yeah.
then had she done this on that same tribe, like she would have probably gone. And so that's where again, why I kind of had this weird feeling. It's like okay, so you take the person that's likely the next vote, you move them to a place where they aren't necessarily likely the next vote because they're probably going to, there's a when now there are two tribes with immunity, like she's likely to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I and that's kind of where I was getting that feeling. Obviously, if they selected it off a platter, then it truly was random, and it is.
Yeah. I the way
But the
they
point is, it's so bizarre that
yeah.
like I created this whole kind of conspiracy theory because it is so like
Yeah,
weird.
it does seem like just a statistically unlikely thing to have happen. But yeah, I mean, the only way it could have been faked is for just the whole thing to be fake. Like it for it, which I don't think they're doing, but it's, we can't know. But the
Right.
point is, though, that like the reason I phrased it at the beginning by saying like, how do you think the producers felt about it was because my instinct was that they were probably really annoyed that they didn't get to have more in the way of new interactions with people because Wendy was the only one that's with different people.
Right.
So that the tribe mix up is supposed to have everybody who didn't know each other yet meeting each other now and providing all of these different new things and potentially having people flip alliances and do you stay loyal to your old tribe or do you go with the new people? Like that's what they want out of a mix up. And they really didn't get that at all.
No, especially considering that even with the advantage of being able to, only have to be in the top two to get
Mm-hmm.
immunity,
Yeah,
the same tribe still lost.
right.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, they just can't get it together, and there's
No,
nothing like outwardly wrong with them. Like they're not. It's not like
no.
they're poor challenge players. Like they just for whatever reason can't work together properly.
Right, yeah. And it was interesting too, just because it skips ahead to the end, but just the fact of those five remaining, it's like I could really feel for them in the sense of saying like none of them want any of the others to go home, or at least that's kind of the vibe they went with at the end. We know it's not 100% true because David absolutely wanted Kelly off, and and War Dog had conversations about some of the others, but it's like there were no easy votes, and everyone decided to go with the "we're all a big family" vibe, mostly because they couldn't manage to unite against any one person, so it just felt
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but so before we skip all the way ahead to that, yeah. So the new tribes are, the new Manu tribe in the Blue Buffs is Aubrey, Wendy, Gavin, Victoria, and Eric. And Wendy is obviously the only change there. But oddly enough, she's also the only one who was actually at that camp before. So she's the one that gets to show everybody around.
Yep.
And so weird too that of the tribe that won the chickens to begin with, she's the only one who is
Right. And
actually
so that,
part of the
like,
team that earned the chickens.
right. So you see it as all of these like oddities keep happening. Like you can see why in my like head I kind of had this doubt. Like, okay, not only does she get to be on this new tribe with all these people who are stronger and good, but she also gets to still we get to still have the chicken narrative, because she gets to go there. Oh, and the loser tribe is the one that has to, go build a new camp
Mm-hmm.
to make it even harder for them.
Yeah.
Like it's like there's just so many outside of just the drawing, like just the way, like what happened after that. It just felt so weird
Mm-hmm.
that you almost had to kind of think it was orchestrated. But to your point, why would they orchestrate it in this way? Like this would not have been a thing that if you sat down to
Yeah.
draw out a mix-up that you would have gone with.
Yeah, yeah. So like I would have imagined them being more frustrated with how it was turning out, and it's the sort of situation of like, well, if we did fake things, we would fake it to not have this outcome, as opposed to letting it have to be what it turned out to naturally be.
Well, and then to your point though about what do the producers think? Like I think as it unfolded, they were probably less frustrated
Well, it's
because
like, yeah.
it was interesting to send Wendy back to where the chickens were so she could release the chickens.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see the tribe that had been losing so much have to be the one then to build the new shelter, kind of get this renewed, like, okay, can we do this? Like, is the act of building a new shelter and like kind of being remotivated going to get us through this challenge? Like there were interesting storylines that happened because of the way it came out.
Yeah.
That you probably couldn't have anticipated.
Right. So, they know what they're doing. They find the story to focus on with whatever the outcome is. But yeah, it's certainly a surprising result. So in the orangish yellow buffs, the new Kama tribe is Joe, Ron, Julia, Julie, and Aurora. And then the green Lesu tribe is all, the old Manu people minus Wendy. So David, Kelly, Wardog, Rick, Lauren. And so that was kind of weird. And I liked that going into commercial, we had Rick wishing Wendy good luck with the chickens, and to the rest of her tribe, good luck with Wendy.
Yeah.
I thought that was a kind of a fun way to express that. So there was no challenge. Everyone headed back to camp. At the Kama tribe, we had Joe, who was excited for a new dynamic with the numbers cut, that he was kind of hoping for a little bit more of a mix-up just because he knew he was maybe kind of targeted and on the outs, and now he doesn't even have Aubrey there that he's kind of able to have that conversation with. But at the very least, with fewer people there, it's a little easier to try to connect with everybody. He connects with Aurora and with Ron, although, Ron tells us in the camera that he's humoring Joe. He's actually not necessarily interested in working with him long term. And he has Julia search Joe's bag for the idol.
That was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Just the sequence of it where we have him there in the scene talking to Joe of like, oh yeah, targeting you is the last thing I would want to do. Cut to confessional of, yeah, while we were having that conversation, Julia was searching his bag on my orders.
Yeah, like we were actually targeting him while I was talking to him about how we were not targeting him.
Yeah, so that was kind of amazing. And yet, of course, no actual idol there, because of course we know that Aubrey has had the idol from that camp. We might wonder though if there is a third idol in play with the third.
Yeah, there's got to be. I mean, that's the way that it typically works. Like, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the meantime, though, at Lesu.
So actually, I hadn't thought about that. Like until I was, I say it like it's so obvious. It probably is, but why did none of them go look for it, or did we just not see it because they weren't successful? That's
right.
always I forget. That's always a part of it.
Yeah, it might have been that some of them looked but didn't find it, and so they just didn't really have anything to show us. They were also possibly busy having to rebuild the shelter and stuff, so to do as much uh,
Yeah.
idle looking. But in the meantime, though, at that Lesu tribe, um, they discuss their concerns that Wendy will just tell the others everything she knows, which is
100% accurate.
well, except that she also kind of doesn't as much as we would expect, or at least we didn't see it. It seems likely, but we didn't see her actually doing it. What she said instead was she said they were all bullies, but she didn't really elaborate. And she didn't really talk as much about like the specific interactions between them.
Mm. I felt like that was just showing us that she was going to open up about them, even
Yeah.
if it didn't show all of the specifics. Like I thought that was kind of a nod at like, yep,
Mm-hmm.
that's what she's doing, as opposed to we're just going to
Yeah.
go through. We're not like it felt like a quicker way of showing she was going to do that than trying to show all of her conversations about
Mm-hmm.
what her thoughts were on them.
Yeah.
You know,
I yeah, so it may be that she, so they're not wrong at least that they can't count on Wendy to hold the line.
no,
um and this is where we have Lauren talking about underestimating the physical toll and feeling nauseated and not eating, which like it's one thing to say she feels sick to her stomach when she eats the rice, but I don't think just not eating anything is the right answer to that from a health perspective. Am I wrong?
yeah, I,
I mean, she specifically cites that she's an athlete, like that means she knows whether it's okay or not.
yeah. The whole thing seemed kind of like more of like the stress of being there as opposed to like anything rational.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that she like truly believed that it was like better for her to eat nothing at all. I think she just didn't know what to do
Right.
and just kind of created a solution in her head. I mean, that's a thing that people do a lot.
I guess, and I can understand just from a perspective of it makes you feel sick when you eat, so you don't eat. Like I get it, but at the same time, that is a short term only strategy because it's not going to get any better from there if your continued SOP is to not eat anything.
Right.
Um, you're just going to get weaker and weaker, and then it's yeah. So I don't know what the problem was, but um, the fact that the scenes from next time seem to suggest that maybe medical is getting called in. Although I don't know. I mean, if medical is getting called in, I guess I was going to say just not eating anything for even a week, is probably like you wouldn't feel good, but I don't know that that would necessarily merit the emergency medical intervention. I don't know. Might be something else.
Yeah. I mean,
Hard to
I
say. Like we didn't really see anything in the preview that could tell us which, but she's the only one that has now had established to us that something could be wrong. I feel bad for her because that would be a bad situation to be in. I just can't help but think that choosing to not eat at all for several days doesn't seem like that helps. I don't see any. How do you change course out of that?
right.
But in any event, that's kind of where we leave Lesu for the moment. Over at the Manu camp, this is where we have, Wendy is showing the tribe members the new beach. Um, Aubrey is kind of immediately saying, you know, well, obviously we could vote Wendy. That would be pretty easy. I do kind of like her though. And it's like, welcome Aubrey to how everybody else feels about her. um, But so in the meantime, though, this it's interesting that Wendy immediately goes to trying to tell everybody, "Oh no, we need to just wait, and the chickens will start laying eggs, and we should do that." And then the editing of showing her reacting to people talking about eating a chicken was well presented in the sense that she they've established her feelings about that and what she's kind of planning, and then sure enough, in the dark of night, um, I I thought it was fascinating because she was clearly thrilled with herself about having conceived of this little miniature plan and then executed on it uh, successfully, in that she didn't really seem to ever build not getting caught into the equation to begin with, so can't really say that failed exactly. Um, because, I mean, it's kind of like later. There's a later scene where um, they're talking about, like, well, maybe we could go catch the chickens, and she's like, no, and it's like, what? Is there any effort at all being maintained towards trying to say that you didn't do it? It seems so obvious, but the weirdness of her being so happy with herself, but she devotes like half of a thought to, I feel bad about doing this to my new tribe, but I'm doing it anyway, and I'm so happy.
Right.
Yeah, she is a weird player in that she is so chaotic and not doing anything that seems like any kind of a rational strategy. But I am enjoying watching her. She's got a likability to her, even as she's being so weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like watching her, like you said, be kind of weird, but
I'm not sure it would be as entertaining to be there on the beach with her.
no.
Yeah. So in the meantime, we actually have a mid-episode cut back over to Edge of Extinction. Um, it's rain, 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 lots of rain. Um, this is where we have Keith feeling the temptation of the mast. I liked his whole thing about how his mind is his best friend and his worst enemy. I liked that sort of talk about it. We kind of covered some of this conversation already, where he's fed up. Reem is a little bit more forgiving, or at least willing to grant the benefit of the doubt a little bit. Chris talks about realizing he's stuck there with two people who are mad at him. He goes out and fishing. They make peace a little bit. And it was kind of nice. But I think part of what I meant when I said that the episode had started to click for me this time was maybe that Edge of Extinction has been such a big question mark all along, that kind of starting to get a sense of like, oh, that's what this is. It relieves some of that tension, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's exactly what I said when you asked me if this was, I felt the same way as you at the beginning of the episode.
Well, okay, so like I'm not allowed to express that I
No,
agree
I
with
just think
you.
it's funny that
I
you
I'm
didn't say it then, but you waited until we got to this part of it to kind of like, that's all I was laughing at. Not that you're not allowed to have the same feeling. I just thought you would have been like, yeah, I also felt that way. Instead, you
well,
waited
because
until now.
this is the part where I'm looking at the episode chronologically, and this is the part of the episode where I felt that way.
That's fine. I can
Fine.
still find it amusing.
Yeah. You punish people for agreeing with you is what you do. Anyway.
we didn't talk about it when I brought it up for the same reason, because I thought the same thing as you did.
We did,
we
though.
agreed.
I was reiterating it. I agreed with you at the time. Anyway.
All right.
All right. So, I was expressing it in a different way, but that's fine. Back at the Manu tribe, so the chickens are gone. They immediately suspect Wendy because, of course, It was kind of hilarious that Wendy had to actively continue trying to chase the chickens away because they were kept trying to come back to the camp.
Right. They wanted to go back in where they were,
We're
where they
getting food
lived.
and it was safe and they were had protection and these are chickens that are not actually used to just wandering around an island in the jungle.
Yep.
Um, Victoria is fed up. Talks about how Wendy is too unpredictable to be trustworthy because she doesn't value rational priorities. It's one thing, we talked earlier in the season about, but is she loyal? Well, yes and no. She's loyal to irrational, unpredictable priorities.
Right.
So, not trustworthy in the traditional sense. I loved the challenge. So, this brings us to the challenge pretty much. And the I liked this challenge a lot, and I think the fact that it was raining so hard, making those ramps kind of extra difficult, was kind of a nice little touch, nice bonus to it. Because none of the individual components of the challenge were, all that unusual, but just having the rain make the ramps so slippery was, made it more dramatic.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we had Manu taking early lead, but Lesu just couldn't even get anyone to the top for the longest time. Eventually, they're having to literally make human ladders and climb up each other. There's a puppy.
Yep.
So
It's a dinner
apologies
time.
to anyone who is listening to the audio only version of this. You just have to. This is why the incentive to check out the video version is that sometimes there's dogs.
Well, this dog is sitting where he's expecting his dinner since this is dinner time.
Aha. Well, so he
He's
can
gonna have to wait.
wait. He's gonna have to wait, I guess. So we end up with Kama and Manu tied, getting to the crates. It's actually relatively even between all three going into the puzzle, but once again, poor Lesu, third place, still losing. And I even had in my notes at this point of the episode, that's a tough one. No one I want to lose from that group.
Yep.
Not that there's anyone that I really can't stand and wanted to see leave from the other groups, but the frustrating thing is that those other groups haven't been to a tribal council at all. There's a bunch of people over there that we really have barely heard anything from. How do we, so that's what's frustrating about that.
Right, and that's what I talked about, like on the last episode, is
Mm-hmm.
that I want to see, like, I want to see what happens with Joe. Like, there's this whole, yes, he's super helpful at camp and he's got a charm to him, but he's a big target. Like, let's get the referendum on that now. Like, let's see. Are you really ready to get rid of him? The longer we wait, like, then it becomes, it goes into the individual game. Like, I want to see those types of things. Like, that's not the only one, but that's kind of like the big one,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't get to see that. We just get to see the same tribe have to keep, like, picking themselves apart.
Yep. Definitely. All the more reason that it just, like, I, while I share your surprise that the outcome of the mix just seems so unlikely, I just can't imagine that they would fake it this way on purpose.
Yeah,
Um,
you're right. It was just sort of one of those things that was in my head.
well, you're absolutely not wrong that it is a very surprising and statistically unlikely outcome. I mean, they kind of even express that in the show. Like, Probst is kind of watching them split up and just kind of like, I can't believe it. And everyone is kind of looking a little bit like, oh, that's not how this is supposed to work. Um, so, in any event, though, we have Rick and David promising not to vote for each other. David thinks that Kelly has an idol, which it's interesting that he's so sure about that because it's actually Lauren that has the idol. Um,
Right.
and Kelly doesn't even know that as far as we know because Lauren specifically said she hasn't told anybody or wasn't going to tell anybody. So
Well,
in
and she's
any
had not had a need to yet.
yeah.
You know.
So it's interesting too though that given that Lauren was one of the targets, especially given that she's not eating, and so she knows that they were um, talking about her, the fact that she didn't play her idol means she
Yeah,
must have been pretty
she
confident in War
felt real
Dog's
confident. Yeah.
word about what was going to happen. And I believe that she could feel that way in the sense that we saw him waffling back and forth, but probably we just didn't see the part where he makes his decision and he goes and tells Kelly and Lauren that nope, this is the plan. I'm with you guys. Period.
Yeah, and the thing with him that we're going to have to see as it goes along, and he has to actually be more deceitful
Mm-hmm.
with people, is that you can see like, when he's emphatic, like where he stands right now,
Yeah.
because he's so emphatic about like where, like you can tell when he's waffling, and you can tell when he's made a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So, is he going to be able to convince somebody that he's made a decision that actually is false?
Right.
That's going to be interesting because I don't know that he can do that. I
Yeah.
think I think the first time he tries that, they're going to be like, yeah, well, I don't trust him.
No, I agree.
But
Although I
this
guess
time, it's easy to
yeah.
trust him because he probably came to Lauren and Kelly and was like emphatic about this is my decision,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like there's no like he's clearly not lying because he can't do that
Right. Yeah.
anyway.
And although I think that he must at least have some capability just on the basis of how shocked Chris was last time.
Right.
So, he.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, and
But I think you are nonetheless correct that we haven't really seen him have to lie to people's face as much. And so, will he, is he going to be good at doing that in an ongoing way? Hard to say. I don't know. He does seem still like kind of a wild card to me
oh yeah,
because he's really good at being kind of the arc the like storytelling archetype that he fulfills is the villain's lieutenant who is always secretly plotting against the villain but never actually pulls off a plan. He's the Starscream of Survivor season.
that's funny.
We'll see how that analogy holds up, but I'm pleased with that.
Yeah,
He even has a
that's a good one.
Transformer sounding name.
You're right. I was thinking more GI Joe, but
Yeah.
when based on that analogy, that
Mm-hmm.
that makes more sense. Yeah,
Oh well, Destro would be the GI Joe comparison, right?
yeah. There we go.
And he's got the bald head and everything. Yeah, he's kind of more of a Destro. Starscream's kind of more of a laughable figure, but Destro is a similar archetype. Always plotting against Cobra Commander, never quite pulls off the coup.
Yep.
All right. So in any case, we have Kelly and Lauren who want to vote with each other, and the two of them are talking about targeting Rick as on the basis of have to vote for somebody, and of the available choices, he seems like he's the one most likely to flip post merge. And honestly, from their perspective, I think they're right.
Yeah, it's not.
Because, yeah, War Dog seems like he's loyal to them, even if it's only because he thinks he's going to be able to turn the tables on them at some point. And then David, they know, even if he wanted to, is going to be seen as a threat by the other side just by virtue of him being a returning player who had kind of a reputation for talking to all sides. Whereas Rick could be the one that would be, like the submarine, below the radar. So I think from Kelly and Lauren's perspective, I think they actually picked the right target.
Right. Well, especially when they have to, if the person they're going to try to convince is War Dog,
Mm-hmm.
if Kelly and Lauren, again, we're assuming they're working together,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to convince War Dog. They have it's a binary decision. It's David or Rick.
Right.
And what then they have to flip is, okay, knowing that those two are going to be choosing Kelly or Lauren,
Mm-hmm.
they have to make a case to War Dog as to why either David or Rick is better than Kelly or Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
And this, to your point, this was the right decision because David's always going to be seen as a threat. Like this appeals to the, hey, like now we've started to have a mix up. Like we got to think long game. Like, this is, he's the one that is most likely to betray us. Whereas David, we could always bring back in because he's a threat.
Yeah.
And it's a good argument.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, David and Rick's argument is going to be, oh, well, Lauren is, not feeling well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's a weird, and they know he's not, because that's the thing is they weren't prepared when War Dog wasn't ready to go for Kelly yet.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have a good argument for Lauren, and so they created a fairly weak one, I feel like.
Well, I think that the problem that they had ultimately was just that none of them really wanted any of the five to go, but they're just forced to pick someone, right?
Right. Well,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah, but I still think that Kelly and Lauren created a better argument than David and Rick did. Like to just say, oh, well, Lauren's not eating, so
yeah,
we can get rid of
because
her.
I
Rick's
certainly,
going to screw us in the end, potentially.
I think it's
Yeah.
certainly a better argument for War Dog because War Dog's going to be thinking of it in the sense of even if Lauren continues to worsen and has to leave the game for that reason, win-win. We got
Right.
someone else out, and now also Lauren is going to go.
Exactly, but that's how they have to be. That's how they should be
Yeah.
thinking. So, yeah, I just think they handled it better
Yeah.
than David and Rick did, and
Huh?
so
Well, and not only does it make logical sense that it's a better argument, but it also worked, obviously. So,
correct.
so recognize the tree by its fruits there. Um, so in any event, though, we do have War Dog aware to be the swing, aware that he's the swing, happy to have some options. But even though he phrased it in kind of a weird way of saying he needs a dance partner, I liked that he did. There seemed to be at least a low level awareness there of the reason you're the swing is because everybody else on this tribe has someone that they're a very close ally with and you don't. That's why you're the swing is because everyone else has paired up.
Right. Everyone else has a dance partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're the one that's left without one.
Yeah.
So you're in this game of musical chairs, you're the one that has to shove someone off. But I liked that he did have some awareness of that because that danger that is always present when you're in the swing vote.
Yep.
So let's briefly talk though. Just I don't know that it's necessarily a long conversation, but why do you suppose that none of the other four felt like they wanted to target War Dog? Why is Lauren a bigger threat than War Dog for David and Rick?
Because I feel like, going back to what I said earlier, that War Dog, he just feels easier to read right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like you're going to know when he's not with you. And I know you pointed out like Chris didn't figure that out, but I feel like these ones here
Mm-hmm.
feel like he's a little bit more of a known quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And that if he starts to falter, that it's going to be obvious.
Yeah.
Also, I think Kelly isn't ready to get rid of him since he's also being a big advocate for her so far.
Yeah.
So
Well, but so that makes sense
I guess they
from
would have
Rick
only had to win
Kelly
over
and Lauren's
Lauren.
perspective.
Yeah.
So
Well, you need Kelly and Lauren if you're going to vote off War Dog, or one of them at least.
okay, but what I'm saying is Rick and David could have talked to Kelly and Lauren and say, why don't we all vote off War Dog?
Right. And what I'm saying is, I think that outside of like just the fact that I think that everybody feels like War Dog is a known quantity that you want to keep around.
Mm-hmm.
I think they know that Kelly is not going to go for War Dog because War Dog is an advocate for her when she is a target and kind of protecting her.
Mm-hmm.
And Lauren doesn't seem strong enough to do something without talking to Kelly.
Hmm.
So you're really, it feels like a non-starter. Like that. That's just how I feel about it. So
Yeah, I guess that's true. And I suppose it's also true that if the only reason they're not voting for Kelly is because they're worried she has an idol, if they see Lauren as the closer connection there, then you get to Kelly by taking out her ally,
right.
I suppose. Um, oh, one last thought though on War Dog and Chris though is that we also kind of observed that in 2 episodes consecutively, Chris seemed to be the one who thought he could trust War Dog and was wrong about it. So that might have just been a Chris thing and not a War Dog thing. So
True.
yeah, it might not be that War Dog was so successfully deceptive so much as that Chris just clearly had a blind spot there.
That makes sense.
Um, could yeah, it's a possible explanation anyway. Because we did see twice people say, but don't tell War Dog. Cut to he goes to tell War Dog and it blows up the plane.
It's true. Yeah.
Um, that brought us to I guess that brought us to the tribal council.
Yep.
I'm gonna miss Rick. I sure enjoyed the Lesu Evening News. That was a fun
That
little
was really funny.
news anchor thing, and I thought it was interesting. The tribal council didn't actually have much in the way of interesting conversation because everybody had agreed to be on the same page of nobody's trash talking anybody. We're all a big happy family, except we're sad because one of us has to go, but none of us is going to say who we're talking about or why or change anybody's mind because it's all settled anyway. And what else are you going to do?
Right.
So it was an unusual tribal council in that regard, even though I just, there wasn't really a lot in the moment to moment of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, I mean, you say you're going to miss Rick, but remember, he's going to be around.
That's
Like,
true. That's true. Edge
you
of
don't lose
Extinction.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked this. I liked that. It's again a little bit the contrast with Keith hesitating and hemming and hawing about it. It just like Rick basically stands there long enough to read both signs and then without a word just immediately goes for the Edge of Extinction direction. Because
Yeah.
of course, because like
What else are you doing here?
you
Yeah.
know, I've actually been thinking about whether we were maybe too hard on Keith about his hesitation because it may be that it's not so much that he was really having a hard time decision as much as he's kind of hamming it up because he's on TV.
It's hard to know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's also, he's a lot younger, so he may have
Mm-hmm.
just like it may have caught him more off guard.
Yeah.
The fact that like he had made this like definitive decision of, oh, I'm gone, I have to go home,
Yeah. Well,
and
that's
it's like,
actually.
oh, wow, I might not go home. Well, and then he's used to, kind of asking, like, as he asked, he sort of prayed for it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of his default, and that's what made the pause. It wasn't that he was like truly like contemplating it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like it surprised him, and when he's you know confronted with surprise decisions in the past, he preys on it, and that's what he was doing. And they played it up to make it look more like a hesitation.
Yeah. The one thing that I think is an interesting design element of how they've done all this is the emotional whiplash that they've all got to feeling like they got voted out and they're going home and then wait, but now they're not, but now it's uncertain because they don't know what to expect and it's going to be hard and like it's interesting, but I think ultimately the problem is that it's too internal. Like it's
Right.
everything happens a little too fast for them to really get the dramatic narrative meat out of it that they might be hoping, I think.
Right. And Keith was just the most vocal about it.
Yeah.
Because Chris's was a little different in that he was, just basically swearing at them
Hmm.
as he, walked off.
Yeah.
Really kind of
Dang,
internalized it.
dang,
Yeah.
dang, 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 dang.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so in any event, though, when we do get the votes, Rick votes for Lauren, Lauren votes for Rick. They're both really nice about it. I was really interested that Lauren didn't play her idol, given that she had to know that they were talking about her, but it just has to mean she was that sure that War Dog was on their side.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like I said,
Hmm.
she was convinced, So,
Yeah. I did like Rick going out too, like after all of the like the sunny, happy people sort of we all love each other team stuff, and then he gets out, he gets voted out, and he's like, "I take it all back. You guys are the worst." But like obviously
well, with a
joking, right?
smile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I thought that was funny.
It was funny.
Yeah.
I really like that
Hmm.
too. So,
And so even as I watched him without hesitation go for Edge of Extinction, I was saying even before we got any scene of him arriving there, he is definitely one of the people that Chris feels betrayed by. For Chris to be feeling so betrayed, like who is it that he thinks betrayed him? Well, it's David and Rick.
right.
So, so next time, diabolical plan. Do War Dog and Kelly team up to vote out Lauren? Do Victoria and Aubrey try to take out Eric? Maybe someone else needs medical. We see medical people running through trees. So who knows? You know, and hard to say because for as many times as they've had previews suggesting that something like that happens, I'd say as often so and so doesn't get evacuated as they do.
Right.
Right. So we'll see, but hopefully, whoever it is okay.
Yeah.
Um,
We never want that to be the reason why somebody
right,
goes.
right. So I think that's where we finish because we kind of already talked about
Yep.
Rick arrives. He is not. You are not in good graces here, says Reem. So we'll see. But it's funny that you had to remind me that oh yeah, Rick is not actually gone. It's like oh yeah, I kind of forgot about this season's core identifying feature. Anyway, so I guess that probably does it though for this episode.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we covered it
yeah.
all.
Yep. So we will see what happens next week. So try to survive until then, everybody.
That was good.
Yeah, I like that one.